loading. Yes, now.
Hello,
Hey.
everyone, and thank you for tuning in our live stream today. My name is Martin. Over there, this is Allan. And together
Hi.
we're at Twin Drums on a project called the Wagadu Chronicles. The Wagadu Chronicles is an MMORPG that is currently on Kickstarter. Actually, we're currently in the last few hours, so if you want to back us now.
Yes, last
Or buy
chance.
us later, obviously, which is also an option. Today we're also going to start off the stream with a little demo. This is more like, I would say, show around demo. Last time we spent most of our time on a little islet called Sunrise, which is the savanna biome. And today we wanted to show you a couple of other biomes that are also in the game. So what we saw was savanna and a bit of the beach. And today we're going to look a bit at the forest biome, which is where me and Mary live, and the desert one. And here we are starting off in the middle of a beautiful forest. Greetings. Yeah, always be. And as we said, we are always role-playing just to get into the habit of doing that. So, sun is rising. It's a perfect day. What do you want to show us, Zironka?
Yeah, so let's have a look at the forest in general. So one thing to keep in mind is that most of the assets you see. Oh, let me reply in game. Show you around.
Yeah. As always, it's pre-alpha footage.
Yeah.
Everything is up for change. The assets are preliminary, and it's just to get an impression of a look that we are currently investigating and that we are aiming for.
Yeah, so basically all of the assets here are going to be improved and changed in the coming months. That's something that our team, specifically the rainforest, are now working on. So we'll be very excited to show you as soon as we have something. But that's something that our team, specifically So I'm going to start running Martin a bit around. I'm going to the platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
So in the forest, the Emir, they have villages that are actually built into the trees, like little tree houses, or actually large tree houses. So they have platforms like this one, but also part of the villages down on the ground floor, where we have, for example, cows and also a little bit of a farm there.
Here obviously we have cows. It's important to have cows.
Yeah, it's very important. They seem to be everywhere. Exactly. And yeah, you can see a nice fire here. You see the platforms, and also something that we are actually very much working on and looking into is this verticality, to include that, because in a game with an isometric angle as we are, I think this gives really nice effects.
I like how we're running. Yeah, it's angry, so it's hungry and angry. Well,
so
hangry. It's hangry.
Exactly. Then we better get running. Should we go over the bridge to the other side, maybe?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So there are always some little hidden spots.
By the way, an interesting conversation that came up which discusses that I've had some feedback by some Native Americans around the word totem.
No.
Yeah, because it's kind of historically loaded. So it could be that in the future version, for the audience, we might go for an African word maybe. And there's a few I'm looking into. So that's something to note. Many things are work in progress. So you can even names of things could change.
Mm. Yeah, that was actually something I also already mentioned last time. We are trying to find good descriptions that also can be used in role-playing, and we also try to steer away of numerical stats. Like, oh, this is a beautiful
fire. Yeah, but this will change. Like our tech artist would not. It's like an old. It's going to be less stylized, our final fire, but it's bright.
But you can already see how the light is actually.
Yeah, the light is really cool.
So after another scenic tour over to the magic place.
Yeah. And by the way, this is a Q&A. So if you have questions, for your audience. Hi, audience. Feel free to already start asking. What do you think, Martin? Should we start a bit talking about?
Let's quickly jump over maybe to the desert village and then go into our discussion about design elements, okay?
Yes. So, Aziman village, continue. Ta-da!
This now is a desert village inhabited by the Aziman. It's built in a small oasis, so it's a desert. You see a lot of the yellowish, brownish tones, and you also see a different type of building here. And the whole village is an oasis, and there's a giant. Is it a tree? No. What kind of plant?
Kind of like a vine. It's like a spirit.
Yeah,
I think our artist would complain, but it hasn't got a specific type of plant.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the basic. This is the totem of the village, right?
Yes, it's kind of like the main spirit that kind of gives energy to the place. You like how thick this the weed in this lake? It was a bit. This actually me, by the way. Like I created this village. I was experimenting a bit with different elements of design. And as mentioned before, most of the assets you see are work in progress and actually going to be redone. But definitely we're playing around with the patterns you see on the buildings are actually kind of Aziman inspired. So some of the shapes, so you'll definitely see in the final assets, in the final houses of the game as well. But there'll probably be more color in the final houses. Let me say hi to the goat. Hello, goat.
Hello, goat.
I have not. Oh, I do have. I don't think
Jacob was asking, was that a teleportation circle? Yes, but we kind of cheated. So there's a fast traveling that we have in our debug version. What made you decide to de-emphasize direct PvP given our stated influence of UO and Ultima Online, given they both have had a strong PvP? That's an excellent question. I think we will go into details a bit later when we talk about our influences. So we will both have an opinion on that. And Mike,
that's a good question.
Mike asked, do you expect to end cycles of the game and how this might work? And my kids showed up, so
I can comment on.
I can take over. So maybe we jump out of the demo for now and maybe go a bit into the. Yeah, you can maybe answer the question about the cycles.
Yeah, I can leave this in the background. Maybe I'll try and run towards the Ima village while I'm speaking. Let's see. So on the cycles, I think it's a great question. So alpha and betas are going to be in past cycles. So whereas in other MMOs, you just have like a random, we're just testing the game and this is an alpha, and then everything gets reset and you create your characters. For us, like alphas and betas are going to be actual historical periods in the past of the game. So like, and that's, we wrote it on our Kickstarter, you can see which eras correspond as well. So you basically are playing the past of the game. But then when the game fully releases in winter 2022, it's going to be set in the 7th era, in a cycle of the 7th era, and we're not going to be changing cycles anymore. So that's it. It's going to be that cycle, it will stay in that cycle for the rest of the game, basically. So the only way to play other cycles is to be part of the alpha and beta. And by the way, today there's a chance still to join the Kickstarter and be part of it.
Cool. Should we now, I think there was also another question by Mariah J on the Shadow of Mordor comparison. I think we're going to answer that maybe in the end, but let's maybe jump into Ultima Online and EVE Online and the PvP element there, because I think this is actually it's a super interesting point why we have decided against this, and even though our strongest influences come from this direction. Yeah. Allan, you've been hosting or DMing a roleplay Ultima Online server, and maybe you can tell us a bit about your experiences there and how this led to design decisions in the
Totally. So I think one of the most influential, I'm doing that thing that you shouldn't do, like kind of trying to run around and talk, but let's see if I manage to find the village.
Just jump out of the demo. It's okay.
Let's see if maybe I'll make it to the Daima village and then close. Like now I'm set to show the last village. But I was saying like I did this thing that was more than a decade ago. I used to run, I still do, but I used to run a lot of D&D games at the time. And I decided, I had a friend of mine who was one of my D&D players, and was like, hey, you really love role-playing, like, good DM and so on. Why don't you join this server of this game called Ultima Online? And I was like, Ultima Online, this looks like super old, I'm not going to join this. But then I tried it, and the cool thing was that was a server that was role-playing focused. And when I joined it, I kind of enjoyed it so much that I literally became part of the staff after a while, and I was one of the organizers and GM and designers and so on. And that was a very, very formative experience because I kind of learned how role-playing can work in an MMO space. And we had thousands of accounts, people role-playing together, and that was like, many years ago, I thought like, oh, that's something really cool. I hope I get to do this again in some way, And so it was probably, you could say, it was one of the first, together with Dungeons and Dragons itself, one of the first inspirations towards this. And the PvP element is interesting because we did have PvP, because Ultima Online has PvP, but in that role-playing environment, it was very, very circumscribed. So it didn't happen very often because most of the focus was around community activities. And yes, there was some PvP, especially for wars, but it was very controlled. It was very rarely like you just go out and you get killed like it happens in other Ultima Online servers. So yes, PvP, but actually it was very controlled in that server.
What were things that so maybe we have to say some word about Ultima Online. It's one of the early MMOs that actually had many of the features that we're currently trying or we want to bring in the Wagadu Chronicles, like a lot of player creation. It has player-created items and the economy run by that, right? I think these were all strong influences for us. For me, one of the strongest experiences I had in the MMO space is actually EVE Online, which is also one of these player-driven sandbox MMO games with spaceships, where you fly your spaceship through space, and it's very PvP. There is a large PvP focus in this game, player versus player combos. It's very unforgiving, very obscure UI. And I always say I had my best and my worst experiences with EVE Online. And I think for me, I loved the whole persistent universe. I loved the player-driven content. I loved how everyone contributes in this magical way to make the place, right? So, but
I found the village.
You found the village, excellent. But I was also appalled by the hostility in many parts of the game, by how it's not everywhere, right? I was also part of a really nice cooperation, a really nice alliance. I really enjoyed PvP, but overall the vibe was very hostile towards newcomers, I would say, very unforgiving, and a lot of toxicity in there. And I think these are all things that now I try to get back into the game a couple of times, and I never managed to do it because of these reasons. Even though I really love playing it, like I played it very intensely 10 years ago. So for us, obviously PvP is not the only problem, right? It's also about how you build your communities, how you let people interact in general, like what is your driving forces and so on. But also PvP is something that brings out the worst in people, and especially grieving. And grieving, when you have very free and open PvP, is extremely hard to get around, I think. Yeah. All that said, Allan,
I think there's something too about the sense of insecurity and lack of safety to of PvP, right? Many games have PvP, but when PvP is central to the experience, as it is EVE Online, like you have this, I played way less than you did, but I remember like just already as a new player, I was living in fear. So like I never really got too far in the game, so I was never at the point of confidence. But to be honest, if you think about it, that's not a great new user experience. Like I wanted to explore the world and so on. I just thought like, oh no, something will kill me anytime, and yes, the safer spaces and so on. But in general, I just felt very scared. And that is like a very intense way. Fear, it's like Star Wars. Like fear leads to anger, and anger leads to grieving. So it's true, like I agree.
Yeah. But all the other things we loved about these games, the player-driven content, the player-driven economy, these are strong design inspirations for us. And I think if you look towards other spaces, you will see that there are other ways of organizing competition. So we're not saying we want to cater towards competitive players, right? You don't have to be competitive, right? You can be the trader, you can be the master crafts person. You can also be a competitive master crafts person that creates the very best swords or plows that have the most amazing unlockable special skills, right? That can also be a competitive thing. There will be more direct competitions, especially around the whole loops with villages and how villages receive their perks, right? And actually, we currently have a stretch goal ongoing, which is all about small competitions around the different skill sets, right? So that's definitely something we also embrace, but it doesn't need to be the direct player versus player killing, right? Competition is not all killing, right? That's, I think, the main idea that we are trying to bring across.
Yeah, because in theory, PvP could be something broader, right? It could be me versus you. We could be betting on something. We could be like, but the problem is that it has been kind of just condensed into I kill you, you kill me. But there's so many ways of, so I think it's just such a loaded word. It has turned into like this murder, kind of this slaughterhouse thing that in the end, there is in theory some player, every game has player versus player. But yeah, using that word means connecting it to combat straight away. So we rather define as a non-PvP game, even if there is, as Martin is saying, forms of competitions. And you can even create them naturally in almost every game if you want, right? Like you can play almost every game in any platform and compete with someone, with your friends. Or it's just a question, how do you compete? Just a comment I wanted to make on the, there was one. Yes, the Maria's comment. Hi, Maria. So the last house seems to have some gatherable crops. What happens if you gather someone else's crop? So in general, we don't want players to be stealing from each other, and that kind of PvP experience, that like of griefing experience. So you'll not be able to steal things from the other. Even the loot, like when a character drops the loot, is like NPCs or other things that can affected, maybe can get lost or broken and so on, but you cannot go around and steal other people's loot even after that. So it's not about, stealing is not a core experience of the game, just as killing.
Yeah, and I think the point about this is there's another point where grieving is extremely hard to prevent when you allow stealing. And if you just don't allow stealing, you will not have grieving around this mechanic. Right? So that's why we excluded. We still love the thief character, and I think the rogue or something. I think we love that. But if maybe we come up with a good mechanic for it, but for now it is just a much better way and a much better experience for everyone else to not have that mechanic.
Maybe if we have something, it would be more on stealing from NPC, maybe from the spirits, or if we do, we currently don't have that in the game yet, but that could be. But then not with other players. And I think one interesting thing is that if you know a bit of MMO history, a lot of these things that other games maybe kind of try and then fail have been done in the past often. Like Ultima Online itself, which we mentioned, had to step back on many of these things. They had like completely free PvP. The first thing that happened on the first day that the game went online, people were like blocking newcomers with furniture so that they couldn't move and killing them straight away. So like they had to create safe zones because people were spawning and dying straight away because other players were killing them. Like and same for stealing. Like the players were stealing so much in Ultima Online that they had to create these safe havens and the safe banks and so on, because it was like people were playing for hours and everything was being lost because a few players were stealing everything. So unfortunately, on paper it sounds good, like ultra realistic game, you can steal from everyone. And then it translates into experiences that maybe benefit a couple of people, but at the expense of the enjoyment of most people. So it's a bit of a balance, and stealing, unfortunately, tips the balance towards a mostly negative experience.
I just because we mentioned the crops were mentioned, and maybe I want to jump back a bit to two of the references that we sometimes give that maybe are not that obvious for many players. Yeah. One of them is Stardew Valley, and the other one is Animal Crossing. And maybe, Allan, you can talk a bit about them and tell us why these are also references for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I can say is that I agree with you, like they may not be super visible because it's not about really the art style or about, even the vibe of the game, but it's more specifically about mechanics and the things you do on kind of the minute-to-minute interaction. And a game like Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing is a lot about creating things, especially like from a farming point of view. So like picking fruits, planting flowers, watering things. These are actually both very important in pre-colonial Africa, because of agriculture and animal husbandry and so on, and as well in our game in the world of Wagadu. So I think it fits very well the theme. It fits very well the vibe as well that we want, the experience we want to create. So it's a lot about creating things rather than destroying, stealing, killing, so on. It's more about nurturing, feeding, watering, fertilizing, petting, creating. So that is kind of more the vibe of the Wagadu Chronicles. Again, that doesn't mean there cannot be competition. Like, am I nurturing my plants better than yours? Am I selling more yam roots than yours? I'm the best yam seller, but it's not. So this is still part of it, and of course, it's multiplayer. But I think those games are great references around the whole constructive loop that we have in the game.
Yeah. And that's also, I think some people underestimate what interesting gameplay can evolve around doing things like farming, doing things like animal husbandry, doing things like fishing, right?
Yeah,
and
fishing.
Actually, why we are always, I put in our notes as a reference Farmville, which some people might be scared of, but I think there's some gameplay loops in this game which are really well done and interesting and fulfilling in a sense what you're doing. You're creating something, you're building something up, you're progressing through certain things. And these are also experiences I see very well fitting in such a setting. Right? It won't be like there are other things that are not so much to like about Farmville, a lot surrounding social spamming and also a lot of the mechanics that drive you towards monetization. But there are very good examples of farming games, especially Stardew Valley is one of them, where farming, building something, husbandry is really a super pleasant minute-to-minute, second-to-second experience. And this is something I think we also want to recreate there.
A question from Jacob Montag. Will there be leaderboards or anything like that encourage this indirect competition? And I feel on my end it's like a bit early for us to tell if there'll be things, but because, I would definitely keep in mind the role-playing element. So for us, most things are going to be as diegetic as possible. So that doesn't mean that the game will not have any user interface and everything is going to be like, guessing. But some of these very meta elements from other games might not be as prominent or even absent in the Wagadu Chronicles, and that's something we're going to spend the next months working on. So just like lots of random pop-ups saying like this is happening, or look at this person won this, and so on, will not be as frequent and often to be more in-game things. So expect, for instance, some announcements to happen from spirits in the public square saying, oh, this thing happened. So maybe rather than have a leaderboard, you might, and I'm not saying this is set in stone, but just to give an example of how our thought process is, there might be like a spirit with like a harp, like playing a Kora harp in a main square saying like, these are the winners of this week's spirit games. And then the names being repeated on and on in game, but you have to walk in the square and hear it, right? And it's actually the Kora harp being played. So you may expect more of these types of interaction rather than just big UI, user interface, and lots of menus and like fireworks that have nothing to do with the game saying like, oh, you won this.
Mm-hmm. Let me quickly go back to a question from Mariah G about the Shadow of Mordor, because we briefly mentioned it, and I think we discussed it a bit on our Discord channel. But I think it deserves also a more in-depth answer, because last time, I think it was the last thing we talked about, it was a bit out. So our main inspiration that we are taking from this, so the Shadow of Mordor system are procedurally generated adversaries in a Lord of the Rings game. It's an RPG game with lots of combat, and some of the adversaries you have are procedurally generated. They have traits and weaknesses, and they also, the most interesting thing about this, they are not standing on their own, but they have relationships between each other. And in particular, they also react to things that happen to them. So for example, the best example you always give is you burn them in an early combat, they survived it, and then they will be afraid of fire in the future. So, and the general term is that they are affected by players, by player action. And all these things we want to bring to the game. The spirits are not entities you fight against normally, right? There might be some case, but they are other entities. They are there for resources, for quests, for power, maybe for information. And you have relationships with them. And spirits are also we want them to be procedurally generated. They should have traits, so they have things they like, things they dislike. They should have relationships among each other in terms of who they, which group they are affiliated to, and which they don't like. And they also react to player input or to player actions, right? So if you interact a lot with the spirit, if you bring them a lot of offerings, they will get stronger, right? And they might have then another relationship with the spirits around them. And we also expect spirits to be a transitional phenomenon. So spirits will not be, this is also another factor in Shadow of Mordor, is that these adversaries, they die, or you can kill them, or you can actually convince them to join your army in some other instances. And so they disappear or they change sides, and this is also like the transitional element is also something we want for these NPCs.
Yeah, currently the Kika, so the writer of The Child in the Oats adventure, is focusing basically most of our energies on this feature. So it's a really important feature for us, and as a full team member, our game writer who is like working on this and of course with the rest of the team, but fleshing out a specific feature. So we'll definitely see more of it in future.
I wanted to add one more reference that I've written down on my list. It's Destiny, the loot shooter. I'm not sure if you played this. Allan, did you play Destiny at any point?
I played like super. I tried it. I just tried it. Yeah. And then I have interestingly interviewed players just to get, because I just realized it's not my type of game. So I'm curious to hear on your end how it was actually. We never spoke about it too much.
I enjoyed it very much. I also thought it was a very interesting combination of very satisfying second-to-second, minute-to-minute interaction, what Bungie is usually also very famous for, and having an interesting loop on top of it around loot, gathering materials, and obviously then equipment and weapons, and as a progression system. It has its flaws. People thought it had a great story. It never did. And some people complained it was repetitive, but this is just part of the thing. It was really a very enjoyable grind on a large level. Right? Our game will not be the grindy game. I think not like our plan is to enable people to play the game that don't want to grind. Because for me, one of the reasons why I stopped playing Destiny is I played with a group of friends. I went on holiday for a month and came back and was out of the game, right? Because I grind for a month and you could never catch up again. And this is something we try to prevent in the Wagadu Chronicles, I think. On the other hand, I enjoyed very much the system, even though it was not as randomized, I think. The loot boxes were randomized, obviously, but the idea of having some outlet where you can grind for things, where you can actually say, I wanna upgrade this so badly, I go out and do this, dig whatever, I mine so many stones or something, or gold, just to get this axe to the next level. Because it is probably it could also be a satisfying minute, second to second interaction. And for this, we have our equipment system, right? Mm-hmm. The equipment system is built for this, where you have things that you can unlock by usage, right? So if you want to have the best sword, you actually have to use it a lot. Right? And I think there's some similarity there. I mean, you have a similar system in Destiny, where you have to grind together materials to then upgrade. I think we go a bit more direct route there. But I think this can be a really nice outlet for people that really want to play intensely the game and want to get something out of it. Right?
Yeah, I think it's fair that there should be some, as you say, an outlet for grinders, right? Like the challenge for us that we're looking into is to not make it a compulsory thing. So that's why the biggest difference between someone who wants to grind a lot and someone who doesn't is that the grinder will have more upgraded equipment, basically. But you're still both, you can play together, you're progressing, and yeah. By the way, I want to comment on a question that just the initial one from Jacob Montag around the teleportation cycle. I think it's an interesting question just to comment on the fact that the Wagadu Chronicles will not have a lot of teleportation in general. Like, we still cannot say how much and if, but it's better to assume there'll be very little of it. So most transportation will have to be in traditional ways. So with boats a lot, of course, because there's islands. Wagadu is mostly islands, but then mule as well, if you're moving resources, or giant okapis, or whichever mounts that we're going to have in the game. And so even if you're going to maybe let's say you want to hunt, which would be probably the closest thing to a raid that would be there in the Wagadu Chronicles, you don't just have an auto finder and then automatically teleported to other players, and we're not going to have such a thing. So it's you have to find someone in the public square or go to the coffee house and say, hi, I'm a Daima hunter. Is anybody interested in going to hunt buffaloes? And then that's how it starts. So from that point of view, it's much more old school. I think, look at something like World of Warcraft old school and how people are building raids in that way is definitely closer to us than the modern matchmaking that kind of where distances don't matter anymore. So everything is teleported and the map is more like a fancy thing, but not really core experience.
Sabuza asks, hi, I'm currently reading The Child and the Oath, and now I'm wondering if that's a requirement for players to be able to role play well, or will there be an introduction inside the game?
That's a really good one too. So one thing I can say, I think the lore has been written so that you can role play actually quite well without knowing a lot. And the whole falling from Wagadu and forgetting things and losing your memory is not entirely a coincidental creative decision. There was a thinking on my end of how do we allow people to have different ranges of role-playing knowledge? And some players maybe they have dyslexia, and they want to learn or can learn only in different ways. And so for them, it's better to pick a role-playing character that is quite ignorant. I finally forgot almost everything. Versus if you want, you can role-play a character who remembers most of their life and was a bookkeeper in some library in the middle of the desert. And then in that case, yes, you'd want to read The Child or the future material that we'll be releasing by then. So it's we're giving the option to the player to decide how much they know, but we're making it possible in the Wagadu Chronicles to role play either ignorance or knowledge and lore. And of course, while you were playing, you will learn eventually because you just see people and stuff. But at the beginning, there's no panic, no stress. You don't know anything. Hey, just role play that actually fits. It fits. You're confused. You're lost. That is perfect role playing scenario for the Wagadu Chronicles.
And there's, I think, one additional thing that we are trying to convey by using mostly natural language in the game, and also trying to come up with role-playing terms for almost any mechanic or any stat that you will see in the game. It will be very natural just by reading off your stats to role play, right? So the idea is that even if you look at a screen and you see your health, it will says I'm hurt or badly hurt. It will not say I have 59% health, right? So if someone asks you on chat, what's your health? You can say, I'm badly hurt, right? So, and this will support the role play element, even if you don't know nothing about the lore. By using the terms that you're presented with in the game, you are role playing already on a very low level because you don't know everything, but you will by mechanic already learn a lot, right? You will learn about your traits, your skills. You will learn about spirits and how we ever call it in the future, but now totems, and thereby you will have already learned quite a bit about the Wagadu world.
Hi, Justin Harris.
Hi, Justin. Shout out by Justin Harris. Hi, Allan. Hey, Martin. Thank you. Cool. So
I can see another question by Maria here. I think we haven't replied to yet. I love the system. I think the Shadow of Mordor. And I was wondering what sort of similar systems is being thought for Wagadu. Okay, how the system. Oh, that's where I already answered, right? For Shadow of Mordor from Maria. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Exactly. Okay, I think from our side, looking at our reference table, I think we're good.
A comment I'm going to make on the role-playing element that you were mentioning, another thing that is going to be there to help a bit with role-play is that we will have some sort of out-of-game lobby. For now, like I'm calling it a dream world, but let's see what it will look like in the final game. But some sort of intermediate space, like if you are very, very confused, like you're in utter confusion, like what's going on? Why are people speaking like this? I bought this game on Steam. I don't even know what's happening. Then there is like a space where you can kind of get out of actual Wagadu and like you can get some support from the community, from the staff. Potentially there's someone online to say like, hey, this is a role-playing game. You know what role-playing means? Let's explain to you. I personally am very optimistic because I think role-playing is such a distinctive thing. Like if you think about when you're kids, the first game you play is role playing, like like, oh, I'm a doctor, or I'm like like a parent. This is my kid. Like we role play as kids. That's the first thing with those kids. We like role play. We role play with Lego. We role play with dolls. We role play with anything. So it's these. You would argue that probably the simplest form of game. So for most of us, it's just a matter of relearning if we have stopped in the last years as we became adults. And even I can say from my experience. Running, for instance, an Ultima Online role-playing server, many people were new or just heard about it and had no idea, but it was incredibly easy to explain because you literally look for like you walk into the main square or into the tavern, sit there for 5 minutes, you see what people are talking, how people are talking, and say, oh, that's how it works. Like I just need to speak like the character. Like I feel like a lot of fears and concerns of people who never role-played are going to be allayed as they look at a Twitch video, a stream. Coming to the game, they'll be okay. It's not as a scary beast as I expected. And same for D&D. Like people who are really scared to play D&D on a table, they go to the first session, and universally you hear from everyone is like, oh, after 1 hour, I'd forgotten. That's a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, I was role playing like everyone else.
Yes, cool. Thank you. I think I would say if there are no further questions, I would like to thank everyone who joined in the chat, and we will post this later on YouTube for other people to watch. Exactly. Remember, last couple of hours of our Kickstarter, it's currently running. So if you are undecided, I haven't backed yet, please do so, and also tell all your friends that they might back too and play with you the Wagadu Chronicles. I would say thank you all. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for tuning in. And we'll continue this series probably with a bit of a different rhythm. We haven't yet decided what it will be, but we will continue doing live streams on different topics and showing off gameplay, obviously, and the state of these things. Okay, thank you all very much. And
thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah, have a good weekend. Bye.